Does the fact that you are both writers and you've got a knowledge and understanding of all the challenges of that and making a living from it, does that really strengthen the partnership in all ways?
I think it does, yeah. So, yeah, I wouldn't have... finishing Scabby Queen was a race against time. It was finished 2 weeks before our second son was born. And he was born in August, and in May, Alan came in. He was like, look, you're knocking your pan out trying to do all these little rubbishy freelance jobs just to keep yourself in the black. Why don't you just concentrate on this book? I'm going to take some extra work on. And you were writing River City then, weren't you? You were taking on River City scripts, which is the hardest work he's ever done. It's not funny, honestly. They would phone him up and be like, hi, it's 7 o'clock at night. We need you to completely rewrite this script. We put in 8 different characters. We want a completely different plot by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, sort of thing. And we had a toddler, and he was doing this just so I could finish this book, bless him.
Well, I mean, it was worth it. It's a great book.
But it's insight. It's hard graft, though. It really is.
Yeah.
Making a living as a writer.
I mean, anybody who's in the audience who's self-employed knows it's a similar thing. If you get 2 people who are self-employed, you know, your income just goes up and down and up, and it's very unpredictable. So it's really just a matter of that. You don't know what work is going to come in when. You don't know if you write a book, how much it's going to sell, how much you're going to be paid for it. None of these things are predictable, which keeps it exciting, but... you know.
But I wondered, well, the thing about now you've got 2 young children, and there are, you know, so there's a challenge of just being a writer, keeping money coming in, but also just that creative spark, because we know how time-consuming and demanding 2 small children are.
Ooh, yes.
Are you finding that tricky, actually, creatively?
Yeah, especially during lockdown, because the nurseries were shut, the schools were shut, so there's probably people in the room who are familiar with this. They were there all day, every day, and writing was just impossible. It was just impossible. Like, work stopped completely for about 8 months, and then when the nurseries opened up again, that's how I managed to end up writing that book. I wrote at the speed of light, I sneezed, and a book came out. Because I'd gone so long without doing anything at all.
But I think as well we get a lot of, 2 writers in a relationship. Everybody wants it to be Ted and Sylvia. We've been together for 14 years, you know. It's like we get them because we understand what each other needs to work and just try and make that happen for the other one. I mean, right now I am mega jealous of Alan because he's in the middle of writing a new novel, his first in 10 years. And you're on fire with it. I'm watching this creative flow and just being like, wish I could get back into
Well, that's how I felt when you were writing. Just take it in turns.
Yeah. But that's the interesting thing. That's, you know, I'm not trying to be all kind of, they're fabulous, you know, in that Oprah Winfrey way. But it's true, because I know that from the pair of you individually and then as a terrific couple together, that it is about supporting one another.
It's good to be, because otherwise resentments will build up. Because if it's like, well, your career's being prioritised and mine's is being neglected, then that's no good for the relationship. It's no good for the family. People are just going to build up annoyances over the years, so you've got to make sure that each person has been able to creatively express themselves in the way that they want to. But it's I'm not going to say it's no tricky, but I don't think we would want it any other way, really.
So let's start, Kirsten, with Scabby Queen. I have to say, I love the title of that so much. I think maybe I've told you this before, but it instantly took me back to the most brilliant memories of being a kid, sort of a teenager, and really precious time with my gran, who had been moved out of a tenement, Glasgow tenement, and put into a high flat with her husband. He was around at that point. But it was this precious time when all the men in our family would go to the football on a Saturday, and I would go to my gran's, and we'd be together, and we'd have a wee ritual of particular food she would make for me. It was just great. We'd watch the Generation game, and we'd play cards. And my favourite game, because it was so easy to do, was Scabby Queen. But I remember falling in love with that name. It's like, what's Scabby Queen? So it's a perfect title for you for this book, and maybe a good way to sort of tell us a wee bit about that title and how it relates to what you're exploring.
Yeah. So this book has always been called Scabby Queen in my head. I can't quite remember whether the idea to call it that came first or the format, but it's... Does everybody know the card game Scabby Queen?
Ah.
No. So
I think there's an English version called Old Maid.
Yeah, in
isn't
England
there?
it's called Old Maid, but in Scotland and the north of England it's Scabby Queen. And there's an added little violent bit in this version. So you discard three of the queen cards from the deck. Shuffle them about, there's only one queen in there, and you have to kind of pass the cards around and on, and the object of the game is not to be left with the queen, so she's passed from hand to hand to hand. And, the person who is left at the end gets wrapped over the knuckles with the deck, hence Scabby. But I always wanted to tell the story of somebody's life, the sort of person who is big and splashy and charismatic and ranges from one friendship to relationship to another, and then blows it all off and goes off onto the next person from the points of view of people left behind in her wake, and never actually hearing from this person herself. And I can't remember whether the idea to tell that came first or the idea to call it Scabby Queen, but the two just sort of seemed to knit together. Can everyone hear me, by the way? Yeah, great. So the two seem to just sort of make sense together, and always have been. So
and it's been described as a state of the nation book, and I always think that sounds very sort of pretentious, doesn't it? And I just wondered, how do you feel about that title? Because the thing is, it's what you've described there is and we'll meet this young woman, Cleo Campbell, or as she gets older as well. We'll talk about her, but it's this idea of you're not just exploring the wake that she's left, but it's a bit more than that, isn't it? Because you're into politics, and you're a feminist, so you're exploring all sorts of different strands within the story of one woman. Yeah.
I didn't set out to write a State of the Nation novel. It wasn't just sort of like Alan would come in with a toddler and be like, "Oh, hello, darling, how's the State of the Nation novel going today?" So I was a bit surprised when I can't remember who tacked that on first, but it does. It goes over 5 decades in this woman's life, and she starts out having she's a pop singer but also a political activist, and she starts out her kind of introduction to the public is when she's about 22, and she has a one-hit wonder on Top of the Pops with an anti-poll tax song. And from then on, she's always a campaigner. And it goes back and forth in her life. And her mother was political as well, so you see that. And, she was raised in the Ayrshire mining town, so that kind of comes out as well. She was, there for the miners' strikes. And so these, all of these things kind of came together. But it really was, it has accidentally become sort of the story of the last 50 years in Scottish and British history as well. But just as this one woman lived it, I think. So
and you've had high praise, for everyone from, the likes of Ian Rankin to the First Minister as well, who we know is an inveterate reader, and she absolutely adored it. And it sold really well, didn't it?
It did, yeah. We're, I think, 20,000 copies now, which is, I've only written in one other book, but it didn't get anywhere near that. But yeah, actually when Nicola Sturgeon tweeted about it the week it came out, it suddenly was kind of, my editor was watching the Amazon sales rankings, and he was just texting me all the time, like, is it 100? Is it 100? Just this sort of. So yeah, that was one influential tweet.
Wow, that is amazing, amazing. Yeah. And the thing is, what you're doing with the book is bold, so we don't have to call it State of the Nation, but it is an absolutely bold book, and not least in the way that it opens, because virtually at the beginning, our central character is dead, and not just dead, she has died by suicide. So it's a really kind of like, whoa moment. It absolutely hooks you in. Again, did you know from the beginning that that's how it was going to begin? Yeah,
I was always going to start with her dead, and then it's not so much a whodunit, because that, but just a kind of. The idea was to go back and piece together her life like a patchwork. So it's not chronological. It jumps all over the place in time, depending on what I feel like letting the reader know about next, in what order, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And as you said, and the thing about that is then it's kind of like she can't tell her own story. No. So her story is told by all sorts of narrators who can, as we all are, mostly probably unreliable.
Yes.
Because it's all to do with memories. I know that mine is completely wrong when I think back to things. We'll go, that's not how it happened. So you're not going to just give us one reading. You cleverly, I think you're going to sort of give us a sense of this with some little extracts.
Yeah, 3. I'm going to do 3 short readings. I have actually, while we're sitting up here, I've realised that Janice herself does actually make a cameo in the book, but I haven't rehearsed that bit, so I'm not going to do that bit. I did email Janice when I realised, and I was like, do you know what? I was going to change your name, but I haven't done. Is it okay? But I wouldn't do that because I don't think that's a great bit for giving you an idea of the book. So I'll just do 3 really short readings. The first voice you hear is actually Cleo herself. Now, this is just somebody else remembering her monologuing away. But this is just to give you an idea of who she is. I don't think you need to know, but this is kind of the mid-90s and she's monologuing in a squat in Brixton just now. Listen, let me tell you something. In the town where I grew up, the women were glamorous. I'd watch my mum getting ready for a night out at the Labour Club, the same place she went to every Saturday night, sat in the same seats in the lounge, drank the same gin out the same glass probably, and she treated it like, I don't know, the Oscars or something, mate. I'd watch her piling blue eyeshadow up to her brows, doing that Liz Taylor sweep with a pencil all the way round. She'd have her rollers in for 4 hours before she went out. She'd spot clean her best suit or her old dress and have it hanging up in the kitchen by the kettle. She made her face up like it was an art. And my stepdad, he'd put his suit on, a fresh tie, offer her his arm, and they'd step out into the street with all the neighbours they saw every day for work or at the shops. All of them done. All of them with that Saturday night sparkle on, like it would be a dishonour to step out without it, like it was church or something. And the Labour Club, that same old building with its tired walls and the haze of fag smoke, that would become somewhere else, just with one wee tinsel curtain hanging over the stage, the sparkly bow tie on the old boy who sang Sinatra well into his 70s. I'd be allowed to go along, stay up too late, bag of crisps, bottle of ginger, forming a gang who crawled under the table with all the other wains. I'd sit there watching the women's faces, the laughs they put on, the shimmering rainbows round their eyes, and I'd understand that they were all casting a spell. They were all, by the power of these potions, by mutual agreement, transforming this place where people worked hard jobs for never enough money, where every choice was difficult, where everything was functional and ugly, into Hollywood or Las Vegas, some projection of what they'd seen in the movies, where the same old spouse you woke to every morning was suddenly Lee Majors or Farrah Fawcett, where you lived next door to Burton and Taylor, where old Archie from up the loan really was a member of the Rat Pack, where money didn't have to matter just this once. And it could only be sustained if everyone kept buying into it together. Oh my God, when there was a wedding, Doreen, who did the hair, was booked out from 6 a.m. and there was always those fancy ones who'd get the train through to Ayr for it, make the journey back with these beehives and sculptures poking out over the tops of their coats. What my mother taught me was that you always look your best. It was a matter of honour with her. You let it all go, you might as well shout to the world that things are sliding, that you're not coping. It lets the team down when they're dealing with things just as hard and worse. She never let anyone outside of me and my stepdad see her in her house coat. I hardly ever saw her without her makeup the whole time I was growing up with her. It's a working class thing, this. Yous don't get to tell a working class woman that her lipstick isn't feminist, because it's a signal of solidarity. This is a great big slash of solidarity I'm wearing across my face right now. So that's Cleo. She likes a monologue, does Cleo. Originally, I was going to try and keep her kind of, the idea was that it was only going to be other people's memories, but this woman would not shut up. There are a lot of and I'll go back to her childhood for a wee bit, her early childhood. So this narrator here is Donald, who is, well, you'll find out about Donald, and we're kind of roughly about 1968 now. Although to his knowledge there was never a christening, of course they named him Godfather. And the only picture he had of himself with Cleona Jean Campbell, she was 3 days old, balanced on a cushion in his lap and mouthing the rough wool of his jumper in her sleep. Malcolm had bought the Brock's brownie especially, seemed always to be snapping her. It was lost or pawned sometime before her 3rd birthday. Her mother, Eileen, called her both names, Cleona Jean, emphasis on the 2nd. Malcolm, her father, had a litany of pet names, each more ridiculous than the next, and the wee girl always seemed to know who he meant, would fix her eyes on him like he was a gorgeous big plaything, gazing at the way his hair glowed as it soaked up the sunlight in the flat. She favoured Malcolm from the start, his easy, rangy limbs and miniature on her, his wide eyes, that wisp of gingery hair. Another blessing that, Donald would think to himself, feeling disloyal to Eileen as he did. It was Malcolm who sang the baby to sleep, Malcolm who she seemed to cleave to, Malcolm who she'd take a bottle from and settle for more easily. Maybe it was just because he was calmer, Donald thought. Since the birth, on the night when the band had been playing out the hotel in Garve hadn't made it back until 2 a.m, Eileen had been tighter, shorter with her praise, her movements brisk. She was retreating back into herself as Malcolm blossomed into fatherhood. He wondered what she'd gone through in that hospital by herself, far away from her family. That was not a thing you asked a woman. For the first few years of Cleona's life, he'd been there almost all the time. He and Malcolm travelled together, sometimes with the Fraser, sometimes with another couple of musicians, always with Malcolm, sorry, I'm doing a Boris Johnson, losing my place here, forgive me. Always with what Malcolm referred to proudly as his womenfolk. Musicians and instruments on blankets in the back of the rusty van, Eileen holding the baby up in front. The years she was 1, 2, 3 and 4, they lived from April to September in a rundown cottage at the edge of a farm on Skye. They played Cayley sets every night in the big hotel packed with tourists. Malcolm, a strutting rooster as he called the dances, affecting a Yankee twang and a bootlace tie pressed on him by a drunk old Texan over a malt. The baby chased chickens about in the mud, laughing at the splash of her bare feet. They bathed her in the sink. Malcolm learned Gaelic songs from the old boys round the way and taught them to Cleona. Eileen walked out to the bed and breakfast a mile away to help them with the cleaning. All of their faces freckled and toughened, being outside and out of the town. Once they'd woken, Malcolm would strap the baby to his chest in a sheet or sling her giggling across his shoulders, and they'd walk together across farmland, 2 men and a tiny girl, till they got to the sea, breathed it in, the salt air scouring their hangovers away. Malcolm searched the horizon for America, tried to orientate himself towards it. Just out there, Cleona. Just out there, that's where we'll go, my girl. Then he'd set her down on the beach, strip off all his clothes and run into the water, a fierce hooting coming off him as the cold hit. Donald watched him from a distance, the red hair of his chin and crotch bouncing in time, his pale skinny arse tensing as the waves reached it. His friend was beautiful, a tiny naked offering to the sky god, the sea god, the ancient shrugging mountains watching but not caring. The baby ate handfuls of wet sand, smeared it on her face, vomited down her jumper. Wow. And I've got one tiny wee more one. This is Neil, who has been in love with Cleona for a long time. Admit it, he thought to himself, admit why you're here. He hadn't seen her in years, not seen her. Television didn't count, nor did the posters that went up everywhere when the single started to sell. Cleo's wild hair smoothed out by some potion or other, her lipstick a red flag, single point of colour against the monochrome. The closest he'd got had been at a poll tax rally in George Square before the song had been signed, when she was welcomed on stage by Tommy Sheridan and handed the small of her back as a very talented young lady with a song I think you'll like. But he'd been 1 in 1,000 that day, couldn't fool himself that she was looking at him. Her voice had been hesitant at first, but she'd found herself quickly, the whole rally joining her on a chorus they'd only just learned. Rise Up had become the anthem of the anti-poll tax movement. Cleo standing on stages in Liverpool and Edinburgh and Manchester and London, her hair in a scarf and her denim jacket studded with badges. People began to cheer for her in advance if they knew she was on the bill. Cleo, Cleo. Some opportunist A&R man had seen the potential and snapped her up. And Neil had eaten dinner to the incongruous sight of his mate Gogsy Duke's ex on top of the pops, refusing to mime along and stripping off a paisley waistcoat to reveal a can't pay, won't pay t-shirt, just standing there in front of the soundless mic, staring into the camera, while the recording played out around her and the rent-a-crowd bopped confusedly. There was a fade and a cut back to the grim-faced DJ who tried to smooth it out with blandishments, but you could hear Cleo chanting, "We are no gonna pay her," in the background. He'd loved her all over again in that minute.
Oh. Oh, thanks for choosing those. I think that's great. So there might be some people who've not read the book and we get a sense there of what you're doing. And this. Do you know, I'm struck by you were saying, you know, once she appeared to you, the voice, she wouldn't shut up. But I'm thinking what's so interesting to hear that and remind me about reading the book is it's just so blooming vivid in every single section and you cover so much. I'm looking here, so We've heard about the mid-90s Brixton squat. We're talking about the Scottish independence referendum, Brexit. We go from rural Ayrshire to the G8 riots in Genoa and a yoga retreat on the Greek island of Santorini. Right? I mean, there's a lot going on. But you absolutely plunge the reader into that, and we feel as if we're there, and that's why the book stays with us, and I think it's made such an impact. And for you, again, just a wee glimpse of into the writer's mind or the process of doing that. It is so ambitious. Was there a lot of planning to keep your head together with all of this?
Yeah, I did a lot of spreadsheets.
Your favourite?
I hate spreadsheets. I'm kind of amazed it has all come together, to be honest. Because I mean, I was writing it. I had a toddler, and I was writing it in snatches. So there's lots and lots of sections. I think there's 24 different narrators. Some of them you come back to. Some of them are just one-offs. And each section is about 6,000 words long, which was roughly the amount of time I could allocate to one section in detail. And then afterwards, it was kind of like sewing it together like a patchwork. A bit. But yeah, I've never been so productive. Absolutely nothing was wasted. Any idea I had for a bit of writing, anywhere I went or had been in the previous 2 years before writing it, got used in this book in some way. I was just like, if I got an idea for a voice, my writing usually starts with an idea of a voice. I had to work out who this person was and how they fitted into Cleo's world, and if they didn't, they were out.
And what was fueling that? Can you remember that feeling? I'm sure you can. What was fueling it? It was just like you knew that you were onto something with this character, and you felt obliged to tell her story.
Yeah, actually I did. I knew I was onto something, and you did as well, honey, because that's when you took on all that work so that I could stop work and get this finished. It just kind of roared out of me, actually. I wasn't quite expecting this to all come together, and it just did.
Yeah.
I didn't have any self-doubt. I maybe didn't have time for writer's block because it was just this part-time work and a toddler, and I didn't have... My first book took 5 years. It was half the length of this one, and there was a whole year where I didn't even look at it, didn't think I had the right to tell this story. Just didn't have time to question myself this time. So yeah.
No, it is amazing, and at some point you will look back, and maybe you're doing that now and going, how the hell did I do that? Yeah, but it is extraordinary how much you can actually do when you are ludicrously busy.
Yeah.
And you keep going ahead. And you've also got a very supportive partner here who understands the process too. Have you got memories of that time? Were you seeing Kirsten in a sort of particular state of mind?
She was kind of in a trance for quite a long time, really. What I remember mainly about it was what was happening politically in the world, because we had Brexit and we had Donald Trump, we had the rise of Boris Johnson and all this awful stuff. And I was saying to her, oh, honey, God, wait till you hear what's happening next. And she's like, don't. Like, you didn't want to let any of it in. And I was like, we've got to talk about this. This is awful. And you're like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to know what's happening. I don't want to even think about it. And then I saw where it was all going.
Yeah.
You know, like all the politics was coming out of the book. And it was like you didn't quite have enough energy to be able to deal with it in the world. So it was all coming out in the book. And now we've switched. Yeah. Because Kirsten's super engaged with politics and I've just detached. Partly because I'm writing a novel and I suppose it will come out there, but also partly I'm just like exhausted with it all.
You need a wee bit of self-preservation, don't you?
Well, you've only got so much mental energy to go around, and when you've got kids and you're writing a novel, which takes up huge amounts of mental energy, you can't really get too involved in politics.
Particularly if a lot of that ends up with you being very angry. That's
a series of things will do that.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, let's talk about, because what these two books have in common are these incredible central female characters, and yours absolutely has an incredible voice. So Alan's novella is called Lazy Susan, as I say, another cracking title. So why a novella?
It was all really I had the time to write. I didn't quite think I was ready to write a novel yet. I haven't written a novel in quite a long time. The last one that came out was 2011. And I didn't really have the room in my head or in my schedule, for that matter, to be able to deal with a whole novel. But I thought I could maybe hammer something out that was quite quick and dirty and had a lot of energy, and it was kind of backed up from the months of complete inactivity during lockdown. So a novella felt manageable. I mean, also, I also work in theatre, and I've mainly been doing theatre for the last 10 years, and theatre stopped completely. So there was no point. I thought, well, what? There's no real reason to sit round and write a series of plays that I might never be on again, because Didn't even know if theatres would still be there by the time it all ended. So I thought, right, I really need to go back to prose. So that was why. And also there's something about the size of this particular story, because it's set over a weekend. Kirsten's book spans 50 years and mine spans a weekend.
It's a hell of a busy weekend, though,
isn't it? It's a very busy weekend, to be fair. Aye, but a weekend-sized story felt like a novella rather than a big...
And also you have sort of previous with inhabiting a female character. Although I wonder, no, let's not go there. I was going to say, is that allowed now? Are we allowed to do that?
In what sense?
Well, I mean, just there's so much cancel culture now. I can imagine some people going, Alan Bisset,
right, okay.
You're inhabiting the character of a 22-year-old girl. How very dare you?
Well, that is a conversation we had. Because you were a bit like, she's 22, now I'm 46. And in the Venn diagram of social interactions, you've got 46-year-old men, you've got 22-year-old girls, and look, they never meet. Like, I don't know any people in their 20s.
Unless you're Harvey Weinstein.
Well, aye, which I think she would have spotted it if I was. No, I didn't really know that many people in their 20s, and I thought, well, that's a challenge, actually, to be able to think your way into somebody who's got almost nothing in common with you. So, aye, there are these issues, like who has the right to tell which stories. And I understand why those questions are asked, but I think if we followed that to its logical conclusion, writing would be very boring, because people would just write the same character over and over again, which is a different version of themselves.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to I mean, the novel I'm writing just now is about witches.
Yeah.
So it's an all-female cast. And I have had the conversation, like, do I have the right to write a book about witches, considering how loaded politically that is? But I thought, well, people will only get annoyed if you make an arse of it. Mm-hmm. You know, I think people go, well, you should never have done that, mate. Is that how you think women talk? So
do you know what my bottom line is? It's all made up anyway.
Well,
get over it, people.
Right.
It's fiction. Yeah. So Susie Q. Martin, 22, described as a working-class Scottish Holly Golightly. So the thing is, also, you have previously inhabited Moira. If people have been at the Fringe, you've done the Moira monologues. She's an older woman, a kind of matriarch, and another really, really powerful figure. Mm-hmm. But you totally inhabit that voice, and out it goes. What we heard, what was sort of propelling Kirsten. What tell us about this particular character in Lazy Susan? What propelled you with her to tell her story? Well,
I mean, I've written plenty of novels about men, and I've written about young men, but I've never written about a young woman. And just observing that sort of culture from afar. So she wants to be a social media influencer. She doesn't have a great deal of means, but she has a lot of energy, and she presents really well. So she does makeup tutorials and stuff like that on YouTube. And this particular weekend, she's gone between parties on the East Coast. Starts off in Stonehaven on the Friday, a party in a hotel room, and she's just about to travel down to Edinburgh for the Fringe so she can document it on Instagram.
And
so,
I was going to say, maybe you're going to say it, but the thing is, you might have a certain type of person, an idea of that person from what you said, but she's got a completely contrasting day job.
That's right, and you don't find out what her day job is until right at the end.
Well, I shut it then, just now?
We'll not quite say, because it is a surprise when people find out what she does when she's no partying.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to kind of, this will sound so patronising, but I really wanted to kind of look at youth culture and from the outside, because I've written about it for the inside when I was young, and I wanted to kind of look at it and say, well, what is this? What does this mean? This Instagram world, what is it all about? But no writing about it in a kind of hypercritical way, like, you know, an old man shouts at clouds. You know, it would be too easy to do that. You know, so that's sort of where I was coming from.
I did give you help with Instagram, because you don't use Instagram, and you'd kind of got it a bit.
I kept calling it Pinstagram because I got mixed up between Pinterest and Instagram. So that's how far outside of the zeitgeist I am.
I'm 5 years younger, and sometimes it feels like a whole generation.
Yeah.
Kirsten, what's a computer?
But then you had helped with the advice on your knowledge of Britpop music and all of that stuff, hadn't you?
It was SCABBY QUEEN. Actually, he gave me. He came in and he was like, "Oh no, they wouldn't be listening to that. Wait, album that hadn't come out at this point."
Yeah.
So.
I love that.
So cool.
I love that. So the thing about it is, I mean, this is all her. We're literally hearing from her.
Yes.
You're not telling the story.
First person.
It's also quite an experimental novel, so there's various things to talk about. I don't want to do spoilers though. So are you going to give us her?
I am. So there's a very particular structure which will become apparent as I read. She is at this point in a train station waiting room in Stonehaven, having just left a party the night before and is about to go down to Edinburgh. I mean, life's about feeling good, or it should be. The world's too serious, man. Everybody's raging all the time. Folk need to chill out, learn how to enjoy themselves again, dancing and drinking and a wee toot and good conversation right into the night. Yes, the patter. Every time, likes. Door opens. In walks 3 teenage lassies tottering on their heels and flicking their hair. Far too dolled up. The way all teenage lassies seem to be these days. Wasn't it like that in my day? She's 22. They could really benefit from one of my makeup tutorials, to be quite honest with you. But hey, I didn't try and bring other lassies down. They're young. They're doing their best. We were all young. We were all doing our best. They sit down and arrange themselves, course today. All 3 of them glance at me, doing the Stations of the Cross, hair, shoes, clays, nails. They can see. Let them see. Let them learn. Lead by example. That's what I say. So they start their conversation back up. And he told Magda he really likes that lassie's way. So he's just using her. He's just using them both. He is just using them both. He's a user. They're using each other though. Magda wants a Wayne. Oh no, you are joking. I'm like, Magda, what are you wanting a Wayne for? Honestly, he needs to watch. She's going to trap him. She is going to trap him. I think that's her game. Well, that is a dangerous game they're both playing. No, I thought you're wanting a Wayne. But what a way to go about it, really. If you want to interrupt the girls' conversation by saying something nice to them, turn to page 10. If you want to interrupt the girls' conversation by saying something about the Black Death of the 17th century, turn to 11. So what's it going to be? 11. I thought you would say that. Hey, lassies, I says, and they all turns round to me. Their eyes immediately summon me up. I was watching this documentary about the plague the other night. Do you ken how it was caused? What? Says one of them, the tallest one, the best looking one, the alpha. The plague, I says, the Black Death. Do you ken how it was caused? They look at each other as if to see if at least one of them understands why I'm saying this. I'm not even totally sure why I'm saying it. But sometimes you find yourself doing that. You say something, you just come out with something and you think, what the fuck did I say that for? Like some supernatural entity has like taken out your body for a wee minute and made a decision on your behalf. Just to see what will happen, like some prankster exorcist demon or something. That's the only way I can make sense of why I've just asked them about the Black fucking Death. But I'm committed to this now and I need to make it work. Was it no rats? One of them says, the weeest chin, probably the brains of this outfit. Did they not get out of control? Alpha looks at brains and the lassie in the middle, who I can see has modelled herself a wee bit on Alpha. Same hair, same nails, same eye makeup, except she's not pulling it off quite so well. Her eyebrows are a wee bit like a clown's. She laughs. Oh my God, Emma, Alpha says. Well, aye, the fleas on the rats, I says. But do you ken how they get out of control? How? Says Alpha. Totally still, her chin raised a wee bit. I can see she's thinking, this better be good, you total bam. There was this ruler of this country it all started in, right? Greece or Turkey or Persia or wherever. And he thought cats were evil. So he demanded that everybody in the country kill all the cats. So they killed all the cats, and then the rats were out of control, and that's how the Black Death started. Alpha and Beta look at each other. Alpha makes a, what's this mad bitch face at her? But Brains is looking at me. Is that honestly how it started? She says, it is, aye. Like a cause and effect kind of thing. Exactly like that, aye. Gemma, oh my God, says Beta, and then looks at Alpha. But Alpha's looking at me. Why are you asking us this? I can see even Brains is interested to the answer to that one. Well, lassies, I just think it's interesting that all these folk died for brainlessly following what this silly bastard said. So, The moral of the story is, never trust a man. Oh, brilliant. Alpha laughs. It takes a second, but then Beta and Brains laugh. You see what I'm saying? I hear what you're saying, says Alpha. Do not even get me started on men. She hates men, says Beta. I fucking do, she says. Then she softens a wee bit. Well, I didn't hate them. They just annoy you sometimes, eh? There's a general, oh, I hear you. Oh, okay, aye. Then Beta feels bold enough to strike out on her own. I didn't hate men. Men have got it hard. And Brains goes, oh, Lindsay, seriously? I do. I think that. How have men got it hard, says Alpha, compared to us? Alpha looks at me. I hodds up my horns. Lassies, I says. Lassies. We all like men for some things. But there is nae beating the company of your pals. I points my phone at them. It is good to see a group of pals out on a day out. He's gone to the Edinburgh Festival. Alpha holds her fingers up in the air. Put your hands up for Detroit, she goes. I love this city, adds, and we laughs. Oh, I'm jealous of yous lassies. You not going out with your pals this weekend, says Alpha. Beta is checking out my clays and hair again. Brains is looking up at the telly screen to see what time the train's coming in. I hardly ever get to see my pals now, I says. They're all in relationships, settling down. One of them's pregnant. I'm the only single one. Oh, mate, says Alpha, that's rough. We're all single, says Beta. Well, except Gemma. She's sort of seeing somebody. Aye, but he's got on my nerves, says Brains. Keeps fucking her about, says Alpha. Well, ken what? Tell him to get the fuck. Brains takes a deep breath, and I can tell this is a conversation she's had with him before. That's what we've said, says Alpha. I decides to steer him away for this, realising it's a kettle of worms and they're about to have a big day out, and I didn't want to get in the road of that because Brains has started to go into herself now. So, what are you going to do down in Edinburgh, lasses? I says. They name some comedians and that, but I'm not really listening because I'm looking at Brains, Gemma. She stones and says, right, train's coming. And we all stones and heads out onto the platform, and as we see the train coming down the track, Alpha says, what's your name, hen? Susan, I says, pulling my wee suitcase. I'm Erica, that's Gemma, and that's Lindsay. Are you going to the festival? Oh, am I? Just yourself? Aye, well, I'm meeting a guy down there. She does a quick saucy flash of the eyes. Oh, go you, she says. After all your big talk, says Gemma, no looking at me. And I'm not sure what's going on in her head now, if I'm getting on her tits a wee bit, or if she's just jesting. But I'm interested in this lassie. I laughs just to be on the safe side. You're welcome to sit with us if you want, says Lindsay, looking at Erica for approval. The Alpha Ibis decides. Aye, says Erica, swishing her hair and smiling down at me, while Gemma says, fuck all, and stares at the oncoming train like it's an approaching angel of death or something. If you want to sit with the girls, turn to page 12. If you want to sit in your own pre-booked seat, turn to page 14. Thank you.
Whoa! Oh, what a joy to hear you doing that, actually, because it makes all the difference. It's like poetry, actually, you know, it's always great to hear it read, but to have her voice coming off the page courtesy of you is quite something. And it makes me think about, you know, talking about the immersive nature of your experience of writing Scabby Queen. What was it like for you?
Well, I've never written so quickly before because I wanted to get it out before Christmas, but I also didn't have a great deal of time, and also had no written for quite a long time, so it was really a joy to write that. So writing's not always a joy. It's sometimes hard work and frustrating and difficult and sometimes boring. But I think when it is a joy, hopefully the reader picks up on that. There's an energy that's created because you know you're happy in your work, and that is the happiest I've ever been in my work.
Wow!
Just hammered it out over the course of a month, and just it's nice when that happens.
Yeah,
it's nice.
And I can understand the momentum of that because she's such a distinctive character. And everything that's going on there. Obviously, Kirsten talked about that, you know, remembering slightly anxiously the spreadsheet scenario. What about you with that? Because obviously there's a momentum there, but there's a heck of a lot going on. both in the narrative, but then also in the devices you're using to involve the readers in making choices. Did you have a spreadsheet?
No, I didn't, but I wish I had. It would have made it. I've got as you could tell, the structure is unusual. So there's all these different narrative paths you can go down. So two people can read the same book, and it turns out they've read two completely different books. You get to the end, and the storyline that you followed is totally different from the storyline that somebody else followed. So that does make it complicated to put together, because you're not just writing a linear A to B, C, D, and reaching the end. It's like A, W, M, L, D, that it's sort of structured a bit like that. So it did take a bit of wrangling, to be honest. But
did you have an editor to look it over and make sure it all made sense?
At the publishers,
yeah,
they did. I think well, in between
you,
that stage, I think I did give it to you, because Kirsten was a bit like, "You sure you're going to be able to pull this off?" Which is a question that you need to hear, because I think I said the same to you when you were describing the book. You get something like 25 narrators, and I'm like, "Ooh, I've only ever had one."
Yeah.
So you sometimes need to. It's good to have somebody to talk it through who understands the process.
Yeah, and there's a quote in the book from Michelle Faber in the back saying that you, Alan Bisset, you're one of the few truly experimental novelists working in the UK today. Do you think of yourself in that way, or are you just
you don't really think of yourself in any way. You just do the work.
Yeah. And
then other people describe you, and so it's like you were saying about the State of the Nation thing. Like, I am writing a State of the Nation address. Other people come with these terms, and it's always interesting to see what terms they use, because I didn't think of myself as particularly experimental. But that I can see why that novel would be considered like that.
I'm going to open up to some questions just a moment. I want to ask each of you just quickly, was there talk of a screen adaptation of Scabby Queen?
Yes, there is.
And
do you know what? They were supposed to announce it ages ago. It's been bought by the Peaky Blinders producers, and we currently we've finally found a script writer, a screenwriter, who I'm meeting on Zoom next week. It's been quite difficult. A major TV network is interested. I'm not allowed to say which one, but they've vetoed a couple of our screenwriter choices. We've finally found one that they like. And if the script is good enough, then a certain red-haired Scottish Hollywood star is agreeing to sign on as Cleo. But this is all so nebulous.
Not Julianne Moore?
Just like no, she's Scottish.
Oh, but she was Scottish.
She looks Scottish.
Anyway, it's
it's all very nebulous though at this stage. I mean, I've been with Alan for a long time, and I've seen all of your books have been optioned for film and TV, and my first book as well. Film and TV, they need a lot of projects on go, so I'm really cynical about it. I am also adapting it as a musical just now though, which is quite exciting. So I'm hopefully, I had a wee breakthrough last week to make it into a Scot pop jukebox musical with Scottish pop songs from kind of the 70s to the 90s.
Wait.
Amazing. I mean, she should be on screen.
Susan?
Yeah, Susan.
You wouldn't be able to translate that structure into a screen adaptation, though.
Good character, though. Maybe in some way.
I would think so.
Oh, tell. You're still writing.
Another scoop.
What?
Susan, you're still doing Susan.
I'm doing what?
The new book.
Oh, right. So, yeah. So the new novel that I'm writing, Susan is in that. She's one of the witches. So we do get to see her like 4 years later.
Okay.
So that book is set in 2019, and the book that I'm writing at the moment is set technically at the end of the pandemic, so I'm just not sure what year that's going to be yet.
Right.
And between then and now, there's been a pandemic, and she has re-emerged at the other side as a witch.
Right, okay. Well, according to Neil Oliver, the pandemic's over, so there you go, you're free to do what you like. Okay, so, sorry. Right, we have our lovely gentleman with a microphone for anyone who wants to ask a question of these two brilliant writers. Go on. Someone be the first. Yes, gentleman over here. Here comes your mic. Thank you.
Hey, Kirsten, I thought your writing was great, but I found it very sad. And I was reminded of Denise saying this morning, it's easy to write about unhappy, not happy.
Yeah, it is, certainly, yeah. I mean, it is. There's a lot of sadness in this book, and I think it's kind of tempered with wee moments of joy in each person's individual life. And I don't know, I like that in music as well. I like bouncy, upbeat pop songs that have got really sad, dark lyrics. And that's sort of how I like novels and pop songs, and that's kind of how I approached this one, to be honest, to try and, if you're taking in the whole scope of somebody's life and it starts kind of grimly with them dead by suicide, then there's, there's always going to be a sadness there, but I wanted to find the sort of the fist in the air moments in there as well, and hopefully kind of by telling the story out of chronological order, I hope to kind of find a nice wee balance of all of that in there. So yeah, but thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for that. It was great. Maybe just a quick one for Alan. I suppose, and it was kind of really evident in your sort of performance of the work there, which was great. And having seen you in this hall doing the Moira monologues a couple of years back, which was fantastic. I suppose it's just the sort of, how do you feel, and as these voices are all in your head, and when you're sort of writing stuff that you might be performing, does that kind of make it different from stuff that's kind of on the page? And in a way, I haven't seen this one yet, but thinking of the way you've kind of made this sort of complex kind of formal kind of possibilities with it, which in a way does seem quite a live sort of thing, that maybe when you see you perform stuff live, there's, it's sort of rolling out in front of you, so there's different options, but I don't know what the question is in that, but just...
well, I mean, some things are written specifically to be performed, like the Moira monologues or various other one-man shows that I've done. And how it feels on the page doesn't really matter, because it's meant to exist in the air. Although that said, I have got the script for the Moira monologues on sale upstairs, so if you want to see what it looks like on the page, you can. And hopefully it reads well, but it doesn't really matter, it's a stage piece. Whereas with that, what is happening on the page is actually really important, because the formatting of it and also the multiple choice nature of the structure means it can only really work properly on the page. Now, I wanted to obviously try and bring it alive for you good people here today, so as not to bore you. But what you will find, if you look at this page, which is from the book, I've scored bits out for the purposes of pace. Because I'm like, they don't really need to hear that bit. That makes sense when you're reading it, but actually it doesn't really make sense here. They wouldn't understand that bit because there's a call back to a previous bit. So there's still a relationship between the page and the performance, because I'm editing for the purposes of doing it live. You just have to know, I don't know, the more you perform on stage, the better you get at knowing what won't work on stage, I think. I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't think you know what the question was, so it's all right.
We enjoyed the question and the answer, so thank you. Whatever they were, thank you. I mean, I'm thinking there's lots of women in the audience, and we're talking about women characters. Have we got a question from a woman at all? Go, yes, front row. Thank you.
Yeah, I felt it was a sad book as well, but I think the one thing that kept me going was that she had Donald, she had Neil, and then she had Ruth as well towards the end, and who looked after her, so lovingly at the end. Did you feel it was important that you had some sort of lift at the end? Because she said, I think you said at one point, Cleo had said, she was true to herself the whole way through about her character. Yet we've got all these individual people, and we see a real sad side to that. But, I took hope from Donald being there and being for her at the end as well.
Yeah.
Even her father leaving her as well.
Yeah. Well, Donald is kind of, Donald, who is, I was reading there, her godfather character. He's just a great big gentle giant with a fiddle who sort of tries to be there for Cleo throughout her life. And maybe she pushes him away quite a bit. But I wanted to say that. So there's another encounter that people talk about a lot where she meets up with an older lady on a train. And I don't want to spoil too much about that, but that was a scene where I had been in a similar situation. I didn't take very much of my life for Cleo because that's not what it was about, but I'd been in a similar situation, and I remember thinking I would like to have had a guardian angel come and talk to me at this point. And so I invented this lady on a train who kind of comes along as well. And yeah, I just wanted to show that there were these people who were there and who cared for her despite herself.
And she, I mean, as you say, she didn't know who this woman, and that was such a touching moment. I mean, I cried through that bit. That was so touching. But yeah, you compare to all the other things where you were fist fighting these people who were against her, and you thought, why are you turning to all these awful people at those times, and yet this woman, as you say, her guardian angel.
Yeah, at that time. Yeah, just wee moments of, sorry. It is a sad book. I'm sorry for all the heartache.
Thank you. Great question. Thank you very much. Anybody else got a question or two before you'll regret it if you don't ask that question. We'll get somebody here. Thank you.
It's just a wee question for Alan. What age were you when you knew you wanted to write a choose your own adventure story?
I was probably about 9. I used to love those books. When I was a kid, because there was sort of the midway point between reading a novel and playing a game. And I just loved the nature of it. I don't know if anybody's ever read them, the Choose Your Own Adventure books, but they were terrific fun. And I've always thought, why has nobody done that for grown-ups? And it turns out, I think somebody has. I think there's been a novel that came out, I can't remember the name of it, came out in the last year, about a refugee, and you have to do it. So I was like, damn. But there was just something, I mean, also, hopefully it's fun for the reader, but you can also sort of start to make commentary on things like free will versus, determination. Because I don't know if you picked up on it, but there was a wee moment where she's like, why did I say that to the lassies about the Black Death? And it's because you chose it for her. That's why she said it. But the character in the book is a bit like, what? That doesn't make sense. Why am I talking about this?
Yeah.
And there has been moments like that in the book that comment on the structure. So, for example, later on the train, she sees somebody from one of the other storylines that she hasn't chosen. And she's like, this guy looks familiar, but I don't know why, I've never met him before. And the guy's thinking the same, like, have we met? No, I don't think we have met. That's because elsewhere in the other storylines, they do meet. So I just wanted to have those kind of ghostly effects. And, there's one section in it where we call it the Voice of God section, where we actually do get to hear from an omniscient narrator up in the sky who tells us all about what happened to her when she was a baby and stuff like that, stuff that she doesn't know. And it's written in standard English. So we get a sense of scale. Basically, the universe out there hovering above this. So the Choose Your Own Adventure format allowed me to do all these kind of things, and it's fun, hopefully.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Oh, see, now we've got like 1 or 2 minutes. Let's go to the lady there. Thank you.
In the last session, Janice Forsyth said that it was very difficult to write about happiness because nothing happens.
Do you mean Janice Galloway?
Denise.
I don't mean, no, I mean Denise Minor.
Denise Minor, sorry, right, okay.
Hey, Yeah. So, do you find it difficult to write about happiness for those reasons?
Quilla.
I think there are bits of both. I think I kind of look at the whole thing. I like as well. It's very important to me that I don't do caricature characters, even the bad guys, especially the bad guys. I want them to feel like whole, well-rounded people, and that's kind of my approach to the novel as well. That I want the whole of life, not just the good stuff, not just the bad stuff, and for my characters too. And yeah.
Just one final question. We've got about a minute left. Thank you.
Yes, this is for Alan. You give the reader choices all the way through your, your novella. Is the ending the same, regardless of which choices you make? So you have different endings.
There's like 7 different endings.
7 for the price of 1.
Is that?
And actually, as well, that's a point on the happiness sadness thing. So there are some happy. You can sometimes read that book and Susie will just have an amazing weekend.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Hassle-free.
And you can sometimes, so you can write about, there's a happy path, there's a heartbreaking path.
So basically this book is the bargain of the century, really, isn't it? It's like 7 books in one.
You got one there, right?
Which leads me in an Alan Partridge way to say that the books are on sale upstairs, and you guys will be signing, won't you?
Yes.
I believe, yeah. Thank you. We're going to have to leave it there. You've both been terrific, and I think it is just, I'm even more awestruck by the fact you're doing everything that you're doing. You've got the two small kids, and you're doing such complicated books, which are just astounding. So, Alan, Bisset, Kirsten Innes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.